Welcome everybody. It is good to be back to the weekly Microsoft 365 platform community call. It is September 6th, 2022. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal program manager in the Microsoft 365 platform areas. And this call has been in a summer break between July and August because we thought that there would not be that much people joining on this calls. And we did keep the Thursday calls, which actually had quite a lot of attendees as well. But as normal, this call will keep on happening every single Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time from this moment forward, and most likely will execute throughout the year until the next end of June 2023 again. We have a great agendas coming up in upcoming weeks of us already, and today we also have really cool stuff to actually show. So we'll cover, of course, some of the typical slides because there's always new people in this course. We do understand that for some of the people that's repeating a lot of the typical links, which might be a bit boring, but we need to always remember that there's new people joining on the Microsoft 365 platform all the time. So it's important that we repeat the baseline information where they can get started. We will have an update on the Microsoft Teams documentation side. So what's happening there? What is the latest updates on that side? We'll have a group photo also in the together mode. So in that moment, we'll put the videos on and hopefully get a full room, which has 50 seats. For now, I think we are actually upgrading the number of seats pretty soon in the together mode, so we can have even larger rooms in those things. And then we'll have the real stars of today. So we'll have 3 different demos, which are kind of scheduled to be 12 to 15 minutes each. So we're trying to get the intro in 15 minutes and then go into the demo section. Brian Jackett and Cameron Parker will start on the latest on eDiscovery premium APIs on Microsoft Graph. Then Alex Terentiev and yours truly are going to talk about the new features in the SharePoint Framework 1.16, which has a preview version currently out, and talk about a bit also about the future and what's coming after that. And then as the final demo of today, we have Meryl Fernando talking about Microsoft Graph X-Ray project, which is a really cool open source project, what he has actually created, and related on Microsoft Graph and automation and so on. Really cool stuff, and you'll see that as the last demo. Now, on those typical links and assets and resources, we do have 2 different YouTube channels. One is the Microsoft 365 developer videos channels, where we have so-called official videos coming from the Cloud Advocate and marketing. Then we have our Microsoft 365 community video channel, where we have all of the community call recordings, community demos, and a lot of other guidance as well. Bit of a bummer that there's 2 of them, but it's okay. You'll figure out what goes where as you subscribe, hopefully, on both of them. Now, on the open source side, we have a lot of stuff in the GitHub. So underneath the github.com/PMP, which is our Microsoft 365 platform open source community organization, and then the official organizations, Office Dev, SharePoint, Microsoft Graph, and so on. As it might be, however, a bit difficult to find the relevant samples from the GitHub because there's so many repos, we started implementing sample galleries. And it's really cool to see how much these sample galleries are being used. So we do have a sample galleries for script samples and web part samples and team samples and so on. And we have the unified sample gallery at aka.ms M365/samples, from where you can find hundreds and hundreds, more than 1,000 samples from one centralized location. Now, if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, luckily it's actually one, which is aka.ms/M365/community, from where you will find all of the relevant information related on samples, open source, community calls, documentation, SDKs, tooling, and so on. So a lot of assets available for you. Related on the community calls, we do have quite a few of them. We are still looking into doing a bit more consolidation with this, but primarily calls right now, which are still executing, is this Tuesday call happening every single Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And that's a weekly call. On top of that, we have Adaptive Cards, Microsoft Identity Platform, Office Settings, and Power Platform monthly calls. And then we have a Thursday 7 a.m. Pacific slot, which is either Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call or the Viva Connection and SharePoint Framework call. Again, a bit of an evolution how we ended up having this many calls, and we're looking into potentially reducing a bit, not too much anymore, on making this a bit more easily approachable for you, because it might be a bit overwhelming on how many stuff and how many calls is happening all the time. You can find all of the recurrent invites for these calls at aka.ms M365/calls. Related on getting started on Microsoft 365 development, we do provide you a lot of free assets. So the first step, what you want to do is sign up for the Microsoft 365 Developer Program, because from there you will get a free tenant with a 25 accounts, which you can then use for the development purposes and example content. And as long as you use that tenant for development usage, it will automatically renew in every single 90 days. It will not do that if it cannot be detected that you're using that for development purposes, because we cannot give you a free tenant for free. It makes kind of sense. It's a business model we do with Microsoft 365. Now, related on the sample material and community, sample material and documentation, we have a lot of Microsoft 365 related Microsoft learning material and learning modules available at aka.ms M365 Dev Learn. We also have 2 different podcasts available. So Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast hosted by Jeremy Thake and Paul Schaffelin. It's a great podcast where they talk about the latest what's happening in Microsoft 365, and they do have visitors there as well. And then we have another one, which is the Microsoft 365 PMP Weekly, which is hosted by yours truly and with Waldek Mastercards, who is a cloud advocate. And we have a weekly visitor there as well, and we cover the latest news and updates across the Microsoft 365. Now, I already mentioned the samples quickly, but I want to call out still the aka.ms M365 samples, which is the one centralized location if you're looking into getting started on implementing something in Microsoft 365. From here, you'll find bot framework samples, you'll find Microsoft Crafts toolkit samples, you'll find a lot of individual samples, list formatting samples, Power Platform samples, and so on. Really, really cool stuff, which either the Microsoft has created or the community has created. So we want to have a centralized location where both Microsoft and community samples can be located, and then we'll provide you filtering and search criteria so you can easily find what's relevant for you. This one is going to get evolving, or is evolving even more within the upcoming months, because we keep on investing and making it better and better based on the feedback we're getting from you. But we already have more than 1,100 samples available from that particular location. Now, if you then run into a cool sample, which is in a GitHub, and you might not be super familiar, for example, on using the GitHub, we do got you covered. And I will let David Warner to talk about what is Sharing is Caring initiative.
Excellent. Thank you, Vesa. Yeah, friends, 1,100 samples. That is fantastic. And where did they all come from? They come from amazing community contributors like yourself. So you have the opportunity to submit samples and use those samples, improve those samples. But as Vesa said, you might not be sure how to do that. Well, Sharing is Caring is a program that provides hands-on guidance in a safe space opportunity. What does that mean? It means that in live sessions, we're going to work right alongside you to show you how to accomplish a number of these topics, such as samples contributors or Power Platform samples contributors. All those samples that we had talked about are done through GitHub. You may be a little intimidated by it. What's GitHub? How does that work? Forking and branching? I don't know. We're going to show you in a session live together, not recorded, which means it's safe space and it's available for you to ask any and all questions. We've got a number of other topics. Some of the dates are getting updated now that we're coming out of summer, and we know everybody's coming back, so you'll start seeing more of these dates come available. But I did want to highlight we are doing a live. This is potentially the first live and in-person Sharing is Caring session ever at the Power Platform Conference in Orlando. So if you're going to be attending, it's going to be an official session. Come sign up, see us there. We'll show you how to submit your samples and get more involved in the community. Or you can sign up for any of these other sessions. They are all absolutely free. aka.ms/Sharing is Caring. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, David, on that one. Now, related on other updates and the feedback, what we're always asking for you, we would love to have your e-feedback right now on our actively running Microsoft Teams development survey. We would really, really love you to go to the HTTPS aka.ms Teams Dev Survey 2022, which is a relatively simple and a short survey targeted to understanding if you are building applications for Microsoft Teams, how can we make your life easier? So please do take advantage of that one. We built all of our services and applications and tooling for you based on your feedback. So if there's something which you don't like, please let us know. If there's something what you like, yes, that's positive feedback and that's welcome as well. So please do let us know either way on that side. Now, related on the material, we also released last week a really, really cool stuff and a lot of videos and guidance and tutorials related on Microsoft Teams application development. So this is a really cool new App Camp initiative where you'll find step-by-step tutorials, documentation, and videos. So this is really intended as an asynchronous way of creating and understanding how to build applications for Microsoft Teams, which are then hosted in the store, potentially monetized through the store model, and so on. So awesome resource for anybody who's looking into how would I get started on building my Microsoft Teams applications. Now, related on the news, there was a lot of obviously news. We've been on a break for 2 months, but we wanted to focus on what's happening within the last week and just raised a few different main topics which are important for you to know. First of all, last week, we did have a new blog post in the Microsoft 365 developer blog related on account linking with Microsoft Teams single sign-on. And that's really about the fact that if you have an alternative as identity model, how can you associate to that one with your Microsoft Teams application? Really, really cool stuff as well. We also released a SharePoint Framework 1.16 first preview release on that one with new capabilities. So there's a blog post related on that one in the developer blog. And then the third one was the introduction on Microsoft Teams App Camp. So really, really nice summary from Bob German related on what that App Camp training material is all about. So please check those out as well. Now, earlier in August, we also did a general availability of Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio. So just to be clear in here, Visual Studio code version of Microsoft Teams Toolkit G8 in the spring. And now this is the Visual Studio IDE version, so the classic Visual Studio Toolkit version, which is now generally available. And that blog post from John Miller really focuses on, okay, how would I use this? What do I actually need to, what are the capabilities which are available? How do I install the functionality to my environment? On the Microsoft Viva side, there's two new or latest updates on that side is that there's a nice blog article around driving adoption of Microsoft Viva at Microsoft. And that's a really nice blog post referencing to another blog post, actually, on how did Microsoft Viva got to be activated or onboarded inside of Microsoft. So the learnings inside of Microsoft, how we are using Microsoft Viva in our side. And the second thing which I wanted to call out is the Microsoft Viva Engage is now generally available, which is, yeah, it relates on the Yammer, and there are a bit limited extensibility platform capabilities there, at least for now, but there's a lot of interesting scenarios which might happen potentially on that side as well in the future. Now, related on the Teams platform, and the Teams documentation updates, we will invite Vachit to do a quick update on what's happening on the Teams docs.
Thanks, Vesa. Hello, everyone. So we have a bunch of updates from last 2 months with respect to Teams platform. Today, I'll be covering few highlights. For more detailed updates, please visit What's New section for Microsoft Teams developer documentation. So as Vesa mentioned in the last slide, so the first update is on Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio 2022, which is now GA. So Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio helps you create, debug, and deploy Microsoft Teams app. So you can go ahead and try it out and provide feedback on that. Second update is on Microsoft Teams meeting transcript. So wherein we have graph APIs to fetch meeting transcript, which is now available in beta. We also have sample code, which is linked from our documentation. Next, we have support for share to stage in mobile. So please note, this is currently available only in developer preview. Fourth update is on share channel. We have added new property in manifest, which is called supported channel types. This allows you to specify if your app is supported in shared and private channels. Last one, just a reminder that the App Studio is deprecated now. Please use developer portal going forward to configure, distribute, and manage your Teams app. So these were the overall platform updates. If you have any feedback or suggestion, please post it on aka.ms Teams platform feedback. The link is available in the footer, and you could also follow us on Twitter and configure the RSS feed to get the regular platform updates. Thank you. Back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Vachit. Really cool to see all the updates in here. And it's cool to see that the Teams meeting stage is available in the mobile as well. I know that there's a lot of people who've been asking about that one. Now, what time is it? I'm quoting you, David. It's big optional picture time. It's the Together mode. So we will, if you're willing to do and join us, put the video on, and we will put the Together mode on the screen, and we'll capture a Together session and everybody waving hands. And let's wait for a while. We have a few minutes until we'll fill in the whole room. There's 50 seats in the room, and I'm starting Camtasia here. 1 second. Here we go. Few more seats. I guess we're filling in. I guess that's it. I'm going to start the recording. Let's do some hand waving, everybody, and we'll capture a key animation out of that. Thank you, everybody, once again joining here. Great to have you as part of the community. A lot of familiar faces. Good to have you back after the summer break. Awesome. Excellent. And we'll capture a key animation out of that. Brilliant. Good stuff. And let me move that in there. And then it's time for the actual stars of the day. So we'll start with the Brian Jacket and Cameron. We'll then move to Alex and me, and then Meryl will be the last one to demo today. But let's start with Brian and Cameron around the latest in eDiscovery Premium APIs on the Microsoft Graph.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm pulling up our slides just now. So great to be back here. It's been 2 long months where we've not been able to see folks, so really glad to see everyone's faces, smiling faces and waving hands. There we go.
Smiling hands. That was good.
Yeah, smiling hands.
Sorry.
It's a new. We're gonna have a GIF or a meme out of that pretty soon. So today, myself and Cameron, one of my teammates, will be talking a little bit about some new APIs that released on Microsoft Graph. These are specifically for the eDiscovery APIs. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can automate this, what are some of the use cases, and then Cameron will actually walk us through some demos to be able to see some of the stuff actually in action. So we'll give a quick little overview again on the APIs themselves. We'll go into some use cases, some demos, talk a quick little bit about some of the license implications for this. Also, how you can actually go and get a demo or a trial environment for this. Great thing. Oh, these GIFs are awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing those in the chat. And then if we have any time at the end, we'll have a little bit of Q&A time. Now, there's a couple of new APIs that have released or are in the process of releasing for what we call Security, Compliance, Identity, and Management, SCIM. So for this, the main ones that we're going to be focusing on today are right in the middle. This is our eDiscovery Premium APIs. If you're interested in seeing which all ones are included with this V1 release, you can go to aka.ms/eDisco Graph API. There are a handful of these that were in beta previously that did not make their way to V1. This includes the export files, hold policies, and also the purge data action that was out there. These are ones that are still in beta. We're working on getting them over to V1, but for time being, though, you can actually see all these things out there on our V1 endpoint. So great to see these things come from beta, make their way over to V1. Now, in terms of the actual, what can I do with these APIs? The idea here is that for a long time now, we've had the Security and Compliance Center inside of M365. This actually has gone through a rebranding. You'll now see it referred to as Microsoft Purview. It's kind of our combination together of what was Azure Purview, along with a lot of the security and compliance pieces. They're now actually under one brand called Microsoft Purview. And as part of this, we still have the compliance portal for this. There's a lot of things you can do from a eDiscovery search standpoint. The idea being, maybe you're a litigator, maybe you're someone who is a lawyer, maybe you've got an auditor who's coming in, and you need to actually go and do a search across all the different elements within your tenant, whether it's inside of SharePoint, in Exchange, in Teams, in Azure AD, a lot of other places. How can I go and find all that content, maybe again for a yearly audit, or maybe I'm doing some kind of legal case, and you need to actually go and find that content. To date, you've had to go through the UI to actually go and find all that content, be able to export it, be able to put it together into cases, into review sets, into a lot of other kind of things like that. The idea here, though, is with these APIs, now we can actually automate a lot of that process. So if you are in the process of trying to do something in terms of a repeated process where, hey, I'm doing this, 10 times a day or maybe more, I want to kind of automate that process. Or maybe you're looking for a way to integrate with third-party software, a great way to be able to actually pull that content in, be able to work with it in other solutions. This is going to help from them, for their standpoint, being able to integrate and actually do things like case creation or managing custodians, but being able to put together the collections for this or run analytics, things like that. So there's a lot of great things we can do basically to automate what was only available in the UI, now make it available for our customers to be able to use, or for folks like our ISV partners or SI partners to be able to integrate with this as well to leverage their own solutions that build on top of that security and compliance pieces. Now, there's a couple of different kind of sample queries that we'll be walking through, but some things you can just kind of see from a very high level on here. When it comes time for doing things like that automated case creation, you can see we've got some very simple kind of URLs to go against. Basically, there's some different post commands on here. We can actually go, and you'll notice that also we're also under the security root node. This is a change from previous. In the past, it was under /compliance. As part of this, the rebranding, the reorg under the Microsoft Purview label, we're now going to be under the /security for this. So find all those under that /security. You can see things like doing management of the cases. So again, /cases /eDiscovery cases. You can specify the different payloads you need for this. Also for creating custodians, similar kind of path for this. You'll just pass in what's that eDiscovery case ID, and then also who are the custodians that are going to be tied to this. That's basically the mailboxes or maybe even some of the sites that are going to be subject to that search that you're doing. And you can even do things like apply holds to those custodians. So once you've set them inside of the case, now you can actually go and say, hey, retain this content so I can actually go and do my, again, due process. I can do any kind of review that I need with this. If you'd like to find any of the different documentation for this, great link down at the bottom out into our documentation for this. We'll make sure to put that out into the chat as well, so you have that for your purposes. Another example out here for things like that workflow automation. If you're going to actually go and create the searches, you can specify what is that content search, what are the keywords, the other kind of things that you're passing in for. You can look at the statistics for this, how many mailboxes were held, what's the size of them, number of sources found, a lot of other kind of content like that. So great ways to be able to actually go and access this, do the automation processes, and actually see what's available to you. Now, enough for me talking. I'm actually going to turn things over to my teammate Cameron, who's going to walk us through a little bit of some demos showing these things actually live. So Cameron, if you want to share out your screen, and the floor will be yours.
All right, thanks, Brian. So I've got a Postman collection here that we can share out. And so what we're going to be going through today is the essentially demo scenario for case creation, which is just one of the use cases that you could automate with the eDiscovery APIs here. And so with this collection, I've got my environment variables already populated with my tenant ID, client secret, etc. So in this case, we're using delegated permissions. So following that authorization code auth flow here to get our token. So I'm going to go ahead and get my token. Now you'll notice that in this scenario, it just went ahead and it gave me my token. That's because I had previously consented to this permission, which is this eDiscovery.readWrite.all. So just something to be aware of if you're going through this for the first time. So moving into the case creation, we've first got here our list eDiscovery cases. So if you've got any pre-existing cases, you can of course use this API to enumerate those. But to kind of get into the actual creation portion, we've got this post call here to the eDiscovery cases endpoint. I've got a few of my variables populated here with the display name, description, and an external ID that you can use if you're trying to tie that this eDiscovery case to like some external ticketing system, right? And so just to kind of show you where that's coming from, right? I've got my variables here. Some of these will come pre-populated with a collection, but of course I've got a few of my own that's specific to my test environment here. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll send this request to get our case created. So if everything is all in well, we'll get back a response, and you can see here that our case has now been created for us. We can then take that a step further and see that this is now populated. Now you may be wondering where this came from. And so in this collection under this tests tab here, what happens is we take that and essentially that ID that gets returned from the case creation and then feed that into that eDiscovery case ID variable. And so that can then be used to feed into this get call here to if we want to just retrieve that specific case or the details about that case. And so if you want to make an update, like let's say we want to update that external case ID for some reason, you can use this patch call to update that that same eDiscovery case. And so if we actually jump back, we'll see that was successful. So we'll rerun this query and see that when we look at the external ID, we'll see that it was now updated to the value that we passed in this patch call for that update. Following that, we want to make sure that we add those custodians. So we're going to go ahead and add a custodian here that again is populated from one of my variables. And I'm going to go ahead and send that to get the custodian created, which is just essentially adding that custodian to the case. Let that complete. All right. And so now one thing to note here, you can see that the hold status is not applied. So we'll be applying a hold here shortly. But before we do that, right, we can go ahead and again, there's a call to list the custodians. So, for now, of course, we just have this one. So you'll just see this one listed here in the collection that gets returned for the list eDiscovery custodians call. But before, again, we apply that hold, we're going to want to go ahead and add those user sources for that custodial resource, right? So in this particular case, we're going to add that user's mailbox and site. Again, the custodian email is being populated from those variables. And I'm going to go ahead and send this request that we can see that I've populated with the eDiscovery case ID as well as my custodian ID for that custodian that I had created. And then looking down, we can see that those sources got created. All right, and then now that we've got our custodian created, we've got our sources created for that custodian, we're going to go ahead and apply the hold for that custodian. All right, we get our 202 accepted, acknowledging that that has been done successfully. And so now if we actually go and we list our user sources, we can see that we've got our user sources here for our custodian and a hold status of applying. So that lets us know that we are in fact in the process of applying that hold to that custodian for those data sources. Now, you can take that a step further as well and add non-custodial data sources if you'd like, just like you can through the eDiscovery UI. And so in this particular case, we've got, again, another email for another data source that, again, in this case is going to be non-custodial, so not associated with that custodian that we created earlier. So we're going to go ahead and create that non-custodial user source, which is their email address. So in other words, it's tying that non-custodial resources mailbox to this case. And as you can see here, similar to the custodian, we have not applied a hold yet. So we are actually going to have to call that non-custodial data sources endpoint to apply the hold to that non-custodial data source as well. And so we will go ahead and do that. Okay, so it looks like we did get an error in that case, but if we test this real quick, just to take a look at that non-custodial, we can see that it actually did apply that hold. So we do have a hold status of applying there. So Brian, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you.
Excellent. Appreciate you walking through us that with the different samples on there, Cameron, and we'll go back to...
My pleasure.
Now, we did have a couple of questions pop up in the chat window, and we'll address them actually on here on this slide. Regarding the licensing/monetization for these APIs, do note that in order to actually use these APIs, this is again part of eDiscovery Premium, it does require the applicable license. You can see them on here on the screen. They're also in the blog post. There's a link down at the bottom on this. So you'll need to have at least an E5 license or the similar type of compliance or security compliance. There's also an eDiscovery and audit license that are out there. Now, that is licensing required just to call the APIs in general. There's also one specific endpoint on here called add to review set. This is going to be what we call a consumption or a metered endpoint. The idea being that behind the scenes, when we actually call into this API, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting on the back end. And as such, there will be a consumption cost tied to that. If you have E5 licenses, again, which required above, that will give you what we call seeded capacity. The idea being that, hey, it'll give you for each license a certain amount of storage. I believe it's 1 gigabyte per license per month. And that will be pooled basically against your tenant so that you can actually call against. So as long as you have sufficient E5 licenses, you may not actually see any kind of costs tied to this. If you're doing a very large amount of queries into the system or using up a lot of that storage, there may be some overage charges that will be tied to that. But take a look at the blog post where you can see more on this. The charges are not in effect today, but they will come online probably in the calendar year 23 timeframe. One quick mention on here on permissions. These are only supporting delegated permissions today. We are working on application permissions. And note that because it requires delegated, you will have to have the appropriate role assigned in Purview, usually things like eDiscovery Manager, eDiscovery Administrator, or similar for these things. If you are looking for a demo environment, as we've mentioned earlier on in the calls, the Microsoft 365 Developer Program, great way to actually go and get that, again, 90-day trial tenant out there. You can find the Postman collection that Cameron's working with on here, aka.ms/eDiscovery/Postman. There's ways to actually import that into your environment. And just a quick little note on the API documentation for this. You can find more at aka.ms/eDiscovery/API. Be able to read up on this and see more of what's available for this. With that, appreciate everyone joining in today. Thank you so much for the time and look forward to folks using this in their environments.
Really cool. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Brian. Really, really awesome stuff. And it's great to see the continuously new APIs and new capabilities which are added on the Microsoft Graph. So awesome stuff. Now, let's move to the next demo of today. And we are almost at the schedule. This is really, really cool. We are learning. We're learning. Now, the next demo is around Alex and me about the new features in the SharePoint Framework 1.16. So I'm going to show a few slides. Alex is going to do the actual demo. Just a quick intros. One of my hats, I have multiple hats. This time I'm I'm not sure if that's anymore true. I at least used to be a feature PM in the SharePoint Framework team. I'm closely involved in the SharePoint Framework development and the next steps regardless. And Alex is an ex-MVP who then decided that, well, I want to fix stuff in the SharePoint Framework, and then got himself working in Microsoft, which is thank you, Alex, for joining. And he's been really, really awesome resource on fixing some of the things available. And even though I need to call this out loud, thank you, Alex, for that one. You at some point said that now all of the issues in the GitHub issue list, which you had reported, have been fixed and still remained in the company. So thank you for that. So really, really cool. Now, wanted to recap quickly. So on the SharePoint Framework is really designed to be the easiest way to build your enterprise solutions in Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, and SharePoint Online. SharePoint Framework is still a pro development experience because you are writing code. You're using industry standard web stack tooling to build extensibility for Microsoft Teams, Viva connections, or SharePoint using React, Angular, or whatever is your chosen framework. SharePoint Framework itself is a really cool way of kind of hosting stuff because the hosting is free. So you don't need to worry about hosting your application outside of Microsoft 365. You will be hosted inside of Microsoft 365. So you will have access and permissions to the APIs because you are inside of the tenant. And there's a native automatic single sign-on, and it's really driven kind of a design for the content-driven applications, but you can, of course, access external APIs as well. Now, SharePoint Framework 1.16 preview release happened last week. I would say in upcoming weeks. I don't know why I should have updated that. It happened actually last week, and the main new features for now in the 1.16 preview was the top actions to support for web parts, and Alex is going to do a live demo around that one. We also announced that there will be a Teams JavaScript SDK v2 native support for SharePoint Framework solutions. I'm going to explain a bit more on that one in a second. And then there's asynchronous support for Viva Connection ACE rendering. So basically asynchronously render the quick views for the Viva connection, which will increase the performance. In general, 1.16 general availability is intended to happen by end of 2022. We don't want to give you an exact date because then we don't want to, if it's going to be a bit delayed, that can cause problems. So we'll try to be as open as possible within our communications with the upcoming preview releases as well. In the development, something which we will talk about a bit today is the bot framework powered Viva connection cards. So this is something which we announced to be coming in build. And this is really designed for ISVs which have built bot framework for Microsoft Teams, bot framework implementation for Microsoft Teams, and now they want to expose their applications in the Viva connection dashboard. So that's something which is in the works, and we'll see if it's going to be part of the 1.16 or the following version. So we'll see how that is evolving. And also we're looking into aligning the Microsoft Teams packaging model. So you might think about this one as the unified Microsoft 365 packaging model as a zip file, almost like a Microsoft Teams zip file. Well, it is the Microsoft Teams zip file, but that zip file does not only contain the manifest, it will contain manifest, the images, and the SPFx file. So we're kind of aligning to that one unified model across Microsoft 365 to make it easier for customers and partners to everybody to build these solutions. More clarity, more alignment, which is always good. Now, before we go to the live demo related on top actions and supported by web parts, which as said, Alex will show, I wanted to call out the Teams JavaScript SDK v2 native support for SPFx solution. This will be done automatically. So, which is kind of a, hey, wait, how does that work? Now, if you have an existing solution which is hosted in SharePoint Online and it's being exposed in the Microsoft Teams area, it's using the SDK endpoint in the code to get access on the Microsoft Teams JavaScript SDK. Will actually update that endpoint to give you a v2 access point automatically. And then, of course, for the new applications which you're building, you can take advantage within your code the JavaScript SDK v2 support and options. And this is all coming to the thinking where you can take advantage of the full scale options with the Teams JavaScript SDK v2, which technically enables you to build, for example, Outlook extensibility with SharePoint Framework in the same way as with what was announced in build in June 2022. So a lot of stuff, a lot of information. We'll get more documentation on all of this and more details. What does that mean in practice and how does that is rolling out? What does it mean for existing solutions and all of that as we're getting closer? But we want to make sure that you are aware what's happening. Also, super important thing, Alex and the team is all the time actively looking into feedback and input from our GitHub SP DevDocs issue list. We'll put the link on the chat from that one. So if you find any issues related on 1.16 or any of the things which we are talking about here, please let us know. And there's an ongoing discussions around where we should be investing as well. So if you are building on something on SharePoint Framework, please let us know what is important for you. Now, let's move on to the actual demo of today and actual star of today, which is Alex Terentiev, related on the web part top actions in Viva Connection Desktop or in the SharePoint Online. Alex?
Thank you, Vesa. So let me share my screen then. So I'll be demoing the new feature we have included in SPFx 1.16 beta called Top Actions for the web parts. And I will start with the demo itself by showing what it actually is. So here I have a web part on the page. And if you are in edit mode of the page, you see this command bar. And top actions actually allow you to add your custom buttons or custom drop-downs, I would say, to this command bar. So here in the example, I have 3 buttons in here. One to hide or show the title of my web part. So if you click, the title is gone. Click back, the title is back. The second one is the title alignment. In that case, it's not a button, but it is a drop-down, basically. And again, if I select center, my title will be centered. And another one for this sample is kind of selecting an image. When I'm clicking on it, you see the pop-up to select the image. So it's kind of basic functionality here for the demo, but in your actual code, you can basically react on the button and launch whatever custom logic you want. So this is kind of a demo what you can do with the custom top actions. And yeah, so we've started this journey from the idea that we want to have some kind of plain, easier UI for the users. And you don't always want to have this big property pane, especially for some simple choices or simple button clicks. And that's why we decided to provide this functionality. And we are using this in first-party web parts too, and for the third parties, this functionality will be available soon, I would say. So from the code perspective, it's pretty easy, similar to property pane configuration. You have this get top actions configuration method that you can override, and it returns itop actions interface. And in this itop actions interface, there are 2 properties. One of those is top actions, and here you're basically providing the array of actions you want to add to the command bar. And right now, the API is based on property pane APIs and properties. So, but it is right now for the first version, it's just what kind of proxied API. So we have this itop actions interface, but inside it actually just adds uses the same types as the property pane, but it will probably be a little bit changed in future. But yeah, the configuration is pretty easy and similar to property pane. So you are providing the type for the top action, and currently we are supporting 2 types. The one is button, another one is choice group. And again, as you can see, I'm just using the function from property pane, helper function, to create choice group. Inside, you can provide properties, as always, target property for your property of the web part, some additional configurations like text, icon, etc., etc. Same for choice group. You're providing label, you're providing options that you want to have in there, and you can provide title. Why title? Because in top actions, it's not great to have like full text, full label for your buttons, for example. Instead of that, you probably want to have this beautiful tooltip. So providing the title adds this feature to your buttons, which is kind of more pretty UI, I would say. Another important property in the itop actions interface, so when you provided the actions itself, you should provide on execute method that kind of has two parameters. One is action name and the second one is new value. And action name is basically the same as the target property in your top action configuration. And new value is the value that should be applied to your properties. One small remark here that for buttons, there is technically no new value. So you will always be getting true, like a Boolean type true. So for buttons, you probably want to just execute some logic or something like that. So for example, in my case, for show title button, I'm just reversing the flag in my properties. But for title alignment, I'm just applying new property. And for open file picker, right here, I'm doing a prompt. But as I said, potentially you can launch your custom logic and do whatever you want. So for example, even for this example, you could use file picker component that I believe Patrick Rogers was doing the demo maybe months or so ago. And yeah, select an image not by prompt, but using this file picker. So as you can see, the configuration is pretty simple and familiar to you, especially if you are using property pane. So again, just two properties, top actions, and on execute, and you're good to go. A few things I want to mention. So first of all, right now we are just rolling out the support for top actions, and I would expect it to be 100% rolled out by end of September. And the second one, as I mentioned earlier, so if we go to the top actions definition right now, and from here I will go to action configuration. So as you can see right now, it's just a proxy of iProperty pane field, but it will be definitely changed because it's not one-to-one mapping. And for now, we decided to do this proxy to just allow you to start thinking about different scenarios, providing us feedback. But when we are ready to make this GA, we'll definitely change it to real interfaces, real properties in action configuration specific to top actions. And back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex, on that one. From a timing perspective, I will jump back on the slides and do a quick intro on the Viva Connect, bot-driven Viva connection cards, and then we'll go from there. But really, really cool. And this is a good example of why it's great that the first party, as in Microsoft, is building on top of the same tool stack. So as we want to have those kind of features in the out-of-the-box web parts, you will get those as well as an ISV and the partner. So you can take advantage of them as well. Really, really cool stuff. Thank you, Alex, on that. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. There was already questions around the bot framework-driven Viva connection cards. Quickly explaining what this is all about. Basic idea is that we'll register a bot and deploy a bot on a tenant, a normal bot framework bot, which will then connect to a Microsoft Graph and other API services, and then basically responds and reacts adaptive card events, which are then exposed in the Viva connection dashboard in a mobile or in a desktop sign. Now, the ETA for this one is still to be defined. Hopefully it will be available a bit later in this autumn. Potentially we can preview this or do a live demo on this one relatively soon, but I cannot give you an exact date when this will be available. GA will happen within the next 6 months or so. But then jump on the final star of the day, and Meryl Fernando is going to talk about introduction on the Microsoft Graph X-Ray project. So what is that, and what is the benefit out of that, and what does it actually do? If Meryl is still on the call. You are awesome.
Yeah, I am.
Take your time and explain what this is all about.
Awesome. Cool. So this is about a hackathon project that we built a few months back now called Graph X-Ray. It's a Chrome, Edge, and a Windows browser extension. And it basically lets you get a sneak peek into the Graph API calls that are happening behind the scenes on any app, any web app that's basically using Graph API. So just a quick intro about myself. I'm a product manager in the Azure Active Directory team. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and you can follow me on Twitter where I post updates about this project. Right. So I'll just give you a quick demo. Then I'll talk about like why and how we built this and show you a few cool things. Right. So I'm looking at the Azure AD portal. I go into something maybe like the users or the groups blade. And you can see here on the right-hand side, once you have the Chrome or the Edge extension installed, you'll be able to see the API calls that are happening behind the scenes. So just to get the list of these groups, you can see all these PowerShell commands that are being run. If you're not a PowerShell person, you want to see what's happening behind the scenes on JavaScript or C#, you can do that as well. So as I click through, I navigate within the portal. As the portal is making Graph API calls, I can see what's happening behind the scenes, and it gives me a really quick way to get into like, what's happening, how you can reuse the same sort of code in your own project without having to do a lot of, deep diving or digging into the actual APIs. So it gives a really nice view into the flow. So why did I do this? We and the team that we worked on, why did we build this? What happened was before GraphXray, what we used to do was we would just go into the Azure portal. We would try to do something, right? Let's say someone asked me, hey, how can I get a list of all the dynamic groups in my tenant, right? So I know how to do that using the UI. So I can do something like, okay, where all the membership type is dynamic, I hit apply and I get a list of all the dynamic groups. Now, how do I get the API for that? If you go look in the API for get group or list groups, you don't really find really good examples of how to do that. There are some basic ones, and so you'll need to do a little bit of digging around to understand how to use what the data filter, the data filters, and so on. So this, and then before GraphXray, what I would do is I would open out the network tab, then I would do this sort of clear everything, do this refresh or the filter again. I would see the call, then I can drill through into this and finally get to the sort of the API call that's happening behind the scene. And it's not really that easy to see, but you get to something like this, right? So where you see the actual call that's being made, right? So that's when we came up with the idea, like, why not take this and show it in a nice, more easily consumable way? And we came up with the initial idea of creating GraphXray, right? So this is how you can get to that. So I'll show you the same thing when let's say I want to see the PowerShell command for that. I'll do a filter, get the membership type that's dynamic, and you can see I get a list of like the PowerShell command that does this. Now, for PowerShell, one thing to remember is that, so how does this get powered, right? So you saw in the network view, you saw that it was just the REST API, right? But how do we get the PowerShell commands and, all the different language commands for this? That's a neat reuse of what's powering the API behind, for example, these examples. So when the docs team write this, they just do the REST API example, and all of these things are auto-generated. So we have a backend sort of a DevX API that takes the REST and converts it to the corresponding language. So what we do here in the extension is call into that API to get the PowerShell and all the different languages. So one thing to remember is that this is the PowerShell side of it is slightly in preview. So you might need to do some bit of tweaks here. For example, these plus signs, they don't work in PowerShell. So, you might need to copy them, make a few changes. Let me show you. So I put that here, but I might have to remove the sort of the plus signs here to make it work, right? So there you go. I copied the PowerShell command and I was able to just run that off the this console session that I was logged into. So a really quick and easy way to find the Graph PowerShell commandlet or your favorite language version, switch to that and get to the data from there. What else did I want to say? Yeah, so if you go to graphxray.mail.net, I think, thanks, Fabian and David shared this. You have the links to all of the different extensions. You can get them. There's a desktop app as well. And yeah, cool, easy way to get into things. Feel free to share feedback, follow me on Twitter, and give us feedback on how we can improve them. Over to you, Vesa. Thanks a lot for having me here.
Excellent. Thank you, Mariel, on that one. Let's close the call, but let's follow up on any questions on the chat for sure. It's just easier. I don't think there was immediate questions. People are like amazed. This is really cool. So it's just makes it easier. And thank you for clarifying also how did you do that, because that opens up another layer of, oh, that's actually clever, because we could use the similar model for something else as well. But that's actually really cool. It makes it easier for knowing what's happening behind the scenes, and the business case is so understandable.
It's excellent. Like you can open the Teams web app, and then your people are building apps now within Teams. Yep. So you can easily pull this up, and you can see what the Graph API calls that are being made. So a really quick way to get into things.
That's actually really cool as well. So awesome stuff. Absolutely. Thank you, Mariel, on that one. Cool. Really, really cool stuff. And please do give Mariel feedback on that one. And if people and attendees in this call have other ideas related on this, maybe Mariel and the team will evolve that or take contributions on the tool as well. So really, really cool stuff. Awesome stuff.
Cool. Awesome.
Now, on the call itself, we are on the last lines on the call. So the recording will be available within 24 hours at the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel and aka.ms M365 videos. So please note you cannot access the recording directly from the chat because I get like 10 requests after every single call, people trying to get access on it. That does not, unfortunately, work for external people. So that only works inside of a company. It doesn't work for external people. That's why we publish the call recordings in 24 hours, always in YouTube, so that everybody can access them easily. If you subscribe to the channel, you will know always when there's a new videos available there. And typically every single weekday, we are releasing some of the community demos in that channel as well. So there's new content all the time related on Microsoft 365 platform areas in that channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, either using the Microsoft 365 Dev or M365 PMP, which is the community account for the latest and updates on what's happening. The next Microsoft 365 platform community call happens a week from now at September 13th at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We do have a really cool 3-session and demo agenda on there already waiting, and you can download the recurrent invites at aka.ms M365-calls. But thank you, Mariel, thank you, Brian, thank you, Cameron, thank you, Alex. Absolutely brilliant demos today. Cool to be back, and we'll hopefully see all of the attendees within a week. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.